Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Roisin White, and I'm Communications Executive here at Fingal County Council. I'll be your host for today's webinar, which is part of public consultation on the proposed protected cycle lanes for the R132 from Blake's Cross to Ministers Road. In just a moment, we'll have a short presentation from Senior Engineer with Fingal County Council's Department of Environment, Climate Action and Active Travel, Mr. Breen Doris, and then we'll move on to a question and answer session, and we really look forward to hearing your queries today. Our webinar will be recorded, and that recording will be made available online in the coming days. This public consultation began on October 3rd and will end next Monday, Bank Holiday, October 31st. During that time, submissions can be made by individuals or by groups, such as residents groups or commercial associations who might like to bring their views together as one. We really welcome your views on any aspect of the proposal for this particular area, and you can share those views at our website, consult.fingal.ie. This online event is your opportunity to ask questions of the Active Travel team. So if you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A box. You'll find that box in the right-hand corner of your screen. And if you type your questions in there, we'll get to as many of those as we can. We often find people use similar language or ask similar questions on a given topic, and you might find we paraphrase or merge some of those questions together in order to get through as many of them as possible in the time we have today. So if you don't hear your exact wording read aloud, please don't be alarmed. Your comments as written will be handed to the project team and all will be read as written. If in the unlikely event we come up against any technical issues, please bear with us while we try to resolve them. If the webinar stops for any reason, please check the email address that you used to register for this session, as that's where we'll send you a new link. Thanks again for joining us. Let's get started now, and I'll hand you over to Breen Doris.
Apologies there. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for the introductions, Roisin. I suppose we kick off in relation to our R132 Blake's Cross to Ministers Road, safer routes to school and cycle path or cycle protected cycle lanes. I suppose next, Daniel, please. Next slide. I suppose what is the project about, and where is the governing body in relation to this, and where is the funding stream coming from? This is under the National Transport Authority. It's Sustainable Transport Measures grants, basically from Programme of Works in 2022. The sponsoring agency is ourselves, Fingal County Council, and the Active Travel Department. That's there myself. The project team is led by myself, Breen Doris, the Senior Executive Engineer in Fingal County Council Active Travel, together with James Kelly, who's on the call, and Colin McCaffrey, also the Assistant Engineer, who's also on the call here today. The project design team and the designers would be Atkins. We have joined forces with them in relation to doing the design on the scheme, and currently we have a design which we have up on for public consultation, as Roisin has outlined earlier. Next slide, Daniel, please. I suppose, where is this project coming from and going to, and what is the purpose of it? So we'll just give you a brief run through of where it is, where it's coming from. It's running from Blake's Cross, as we're familiar with, right through north of Ministers Road Junction. What we're looking to do here is to provide safe cycling infrastructure for both walkers and cyclists and the vulnerable road users along the road. This road would have been, initially it was actually the old M1, as we would all know it, but now it's actually more a regional road, and we're looking actually to make it more usable for the local traffic and basically local people along it. The proposed cycle lanes commence just north of Blake's Cross, as we've said, and travel approximately 2.7 kilometres north along the R132 to the junction of Ministers Road. What we're also looking at is there, as you can see in the image on the right-hand side, is basically Killhedge Lane, and we're trying to provide connectivity back with a quiet way, basically from the R132 back in through Dunedin, and that'll link back through to Corduff School and eventually back then through the R132 scheme, which we're currently looking at, and further streams which are planned. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat, so forgive me if I'm breaking up a wee bit. These works will be delivered under Section 38 of the Roads Act. And we're also looking, I suppose, that people may ask, well, what are we doing in relation to Blake's Cross? And from there, with the linkages back through to Swords itself. That project in itself, which is Blake's Cross, and looking at the connectivity back to Swords, is being looked at through our planning and strategic team, which will require planning permission and will have to go through the rigours within that. Whereas this project has been delivered slightly differently. What we're trying to do is utilise the existing road structure and reassign and reapportion that road use and protect the vulnerable road users. Daniel, next slide, please. Justification for the project, well, I suppose there's a number of justifications really that we'll outline here of what they are. Mainly it's national legislation, come back into climate change and lowering our carbon and development emissions and so on, or lowering our carbon emissions. It's Fingal's development plan, which is outlined there on the slide. Also Fingal's climate action plan, the Greater Dublin Area Cycling Network Plan, and improved regional connectivity between the main towns in Fingal, and helps to reduce our carbon footprint and emissions. I suppose the one main driver, and people may ask, well, why are we doing this initial section? If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, that map that's included there, which is the Greater Dublin Cycling Network, part of that includes an overall network for Dublin itself, including Fingal and right through and into Meath as well, and further north to Louth. So it provides a number of schemes which has been outlined really at a high level. And if you see on the left-hand side of that map, you'll see the blue route, which is the R132, and that is basically reapportioning road space of that R132 to provide connectivity from Balbriggan right through to Lusk and right through again to Swords itself and the airport. So that is the purpose of this scheme. As we said in the earlier slide, we will be delivering part of this, and then other pieces of it then south of that will be delivered through our planning and strategic team through a different means. Next slide, please. I suppose the benefits of delivering this project, it's a combined thing really. It's number one is really we're looking to lower vehicle speeds, which would deliver a safer road experience for the vulnerable road user, being the pedestrian and the cyclist, and also the driver as well. It's creating a safe space for those who wish to cycle within the local area, including Corduff School. And part of this scheme is picking up on the access and egress basically from Corduff School for a safer routes, what we call a safer routes to school program. So it's making it more amenable for those students to walk and cycle to school in a safe manner, whether they're accompanied or unaccompanied by their parents. It's strengthening the link again between Lusk and Blake's Cross and south and into Swords, and also north into the Balbriggan area, providing another safe local transport alternative against the alternative to using the private car. So I suppose what we're looking at really as part of our active travel measures is really that short journey of 5 kilometres or less, that people have that option of using walking or cycling infrastructure rather than basically driving or taking the car, which will help reduce our carbon emissions, also improve air quality in those areas. Next, please, Tanya. Route options. We looked at a number of route options to determine what was the best design in this case. So it's to determine a suitable and safe design for cycle facilities and also for walking in the area. We assessed it under a multi-criteria analysis really for, I suppose, from an environmental impact, also social inclusion, economic and physical activity and benefits as well from that. Several design options would have been looked at, including cycle lanes with line markings, two-way cycle tracks, raised cycle tracks, and so on. The recommended option coming through, basically what we have is a net grade cycle track with bollards and a buffer zone. It'll include traffic calming measures to reduce traffic speeds, and also it'll be suitable for proposed consideration for large agricultural vehicles. What we have recognised is this is a largely rural area with large agricultural vehicles and tractors, and they need to be still able to overhang into various areas. So providing those buffer zones, it provides them with the additional road space they need outside the carriageway width, if required. Next, please, Tanya. The recommended design of 2.7 kilometres protected cycle lanes in both directions. It's utilising the hard shoulder to protect cycle lanes on both sides of the road, so no land take is required. Traffic calming and speed reduction measures can be introduced to improve the quality for the cyclist and the vulnerable road user. Improve connectivity for cycling to schools, as we spoke about in relation to our Safer Routes to School programme, and also to the residential estates in Lustown itself through the quiet way of Killhedge Lane. Next, please, Tanya. I suppose the next steps, well, what are the next steps? Well, where we are in the process at the moment, we've concluded with a briefing to the councillors back in July. We're in the middle of our public consultation at the moment. And what I'd encourage everybody to do is make our submissions known and felt, as Roisin has outlined, and will continue to outline at the end of the presentation of how that can be done. Because if you don't make your feelings felt at this stage, we can't consider them in the design process. We'll have a ratification then of the speed limit. So we're currently just completed with the statutory speed limit reduction along that section of road, and I'll just outline that to you in a few moments. We do a road safety audit, our procurement of a contractor. We liaise further with the schools and residents in relation to how the scheme will work once it's actually operating, monitor the scheme in operation as well, and project review and lessons learned at the end. So basically that's really the steps outlined. We're currently in the phase where we're doing the consultation and ratification then of the speed limit. So we're there at point 2 and 3. Just we'll quickly run through, Daniel, the next 2 slides just to outline where the speed limit reduction is taking place. So just next slide. Next again, please. So basically the speed limit reduction, which we've just went through, which is a statutory process, and that's just completed at the moment and has to go for ratification to the full council meeting and is adopted then by the councillors. We're looking at reducing, or have looked to reduce, basically the 80-kilometre speed limit to a 60-kilometre, and that's outlined there, as you can see. Also Killhedge Lane, reducing the speed limit on that, and also at the mouth of Ministers Road to bring that into line with what's already on Ministers Road Junction, which is what basically further into Ministers Road, which is a 50-kilometre zone. So that's making that a 50 right throughout to its intersection with the R132. So again, what I'd say to people is, if you can please make your feelings known. We've got quite a few submissions, a lot of positive things at the moment, but we'd like to take the positives and the negatives and incorporate those into the design to take this project forward. As we have said from the outset, this is part of a larger project right through to Balbriggan to provide connectivity, and also south to provide connectivity back to Swords as well. So that said, I'll hand you back to Roisin, please.
Thanks very much, Brian, for that very comprehensive presentation. I hope, I'd imagine a lot of people's questions have possibly been answered already by all the detail given there. So just a reminder at this stage before we get into the Q&A that we have going in the background here, that you can continue to add your questions now or later in the presentation. If you just find the Q&A button to the top right hand of your screen, you can pop your questions in there. And just to be aware, because we sometimes get feedback, you'll only see your own questions there, but we are definitely receiving them also. Don't be concerned that if you only see one that no one else has asked them. There's plenty of questions flowing in. So without further ado, we'll get stuck into those questions and hope to answer as many of them as possible. And so the first question that's come in is a fairly common and understandable one, Brian. It's when will construction start on the project?
Where we are at the moment, Roisin, we're just coming through to the end of the consultation phase. Once we get the submissions in, we will be looking at those submissions and dealing with them in relation to the design to try and address them through the current design that we have. And then we would hope to go to tender either later this year or the beginning of next year. So we will be looking at construction in the early part, Q1, Q2 of 2023.
Thanks for that clarification. Next question that's come in has been around public transport, and somebody is asking, will there be any bus stops included on the route?
Yes is the answer to that. Currently, there's a number of bus stops, some of them authorised, some of them unauthorised. And what I mean by unauthorised, I suppose they're unregularised as regards there's no bus stop at them, but the buses have pulled in there for years historically. So we've been working closely with the TII, and they have a number of additional stops maybe identified that they want to incorporate, and we are working closely with them to incorporate them into this scheme so that we're not having to come back again. So yes is the answer.
Thanks, Brian. So if the existing hard shoulder is going to be used for cycle lanes, where are people going to walk? This is a question that's been coming into us through social media as well as on the Q&A today.
I suppose it's a very valid question. We have a number of options there. Basically, this is a combined walking and cycling path, and we also have a number of pedestrian crossings that we're actually looking at as well, and safe havens for crossing the road, particularly around the school area, where we can actually offer a crossing point for people where the high activity is for those road users that are walking themselves. In relation to Killhedge Lane and the links back then to, I suppose, Lusk, that will be a quiet zone. So there'll be very reduced traffic speeds on that, which will make it more amenable for pedestrians and cyclists, that they will have priority throughout.
So those enjoying a walk along the R132 will be able to continue doing so safely?
Absolutely, Roisin. That's in a safer manner
Good news.
Than they currently are, yes.
Thanks, Brian. That's helpful. So the next question that's come in is, why is the speed limit being dealt with in a separate consultation? There's a little bit of confusion around that. Would you mind clearing that up, Brian?
I suppose it's two separate issues there. In relation to this scheme, we're doing it under the Roads Act, and it's a non-statutory consultation. It's really it's a non-statutory consultation for this process. It doesn't go through any formal planning procedure. In relation to speed limit reductions, that's handled through the Roads Act, and that's the duty for the councillors basically to adapt a new speed limit. So what the executives or us as the workers within the council, we have to look at what the detail and data is, come up with the designs, and then present that back to the members for ratification then through a full council meeting. So they're two separate processes as regards. One is formal, the other is an informal process.
Thanks, Brian. I think that process can be difficult to understand, so that clarification is helpful. The next question that's come in is around crossing points. Again, you did mention them briefly there, but can you give a little bit more detail about how and where safe crossing points are being considered in the scheme?
Well, the scheme itself is incorporating traffic calming throughout, so that will provide a central island and a central buffer zone. So people will have a traffic island or a particular area where they can cross. Also, we will have, I suppose, there's zebra crossings and crossing points at the school itself. So that will provide priority in the utmost to the vulnerable road users. So basically from, I suppose, driver behaviour will change dramatically, I suppose, in that road because speeds will be reduced and then a designated crossing points will be provided, which will be quite evident.
Thanks for that. Next question is specifically around Corduff School. Parents of children attending Corduff National School are currently parking in the southbound hard shoulder to allow children exit onto the path and enter school in the mornings and to collect them, I assume, in the afternoon as also. This person has asked, how will parking for parents be accommodated to allow those who must use their car to bring their child safely to and from school?
I suppose we've recognised that fact from the outset, really, Roisin, because this is a predominantly rural area, so not everybody has the capacity to walk or cycle or are close enough maybe to walk or cycle. So there will still be an element of people where they will have to drive to the school. We would expect from the studies we have done and the hands-up surveys that was conducted actually in 2021 and so on throughout the school with the other members of our team, that a lot of the students would prefer to walk and cycle. So once those facilities are there, we would expect that to grow. In saying that, some people will still have to drive there, but that is incorporated into the design where the cycle paths and the parking is still provided. And we're gaining space, I suppose, within the road from, there's a quite wide hard shoulder at that area. There's a quite wide central reservation as well and right-hand turning lanes that we can actually squeeze the traffic down by slowing them down and gain space then for actually the drop-off zones, as we would call them, and pick-up points, and also the cycling and walking infrastructure in close proximity to the school.
Thanks, Brian. I hope that answer reassures the parents at Corduff School who are concerned about that issue. So the next question that's come in. Oh, sorry, work away.
Further to that point, Roisin, we have been in touch with the school and we would hope that after this process, we would be meeting possibly with the school board of management, the teachers as well, and the Parents Association, and we've sent a request through to them for a meeting after the midterm so we can look at the design in more detail to reaffirm them fears and just have a look at what else can be included if there's anything else we have missed. I suppose we are human, we do tend to miss things by times.
I think that's actually, Brian, it's an important point you mentioned there. The reason, again, I think it's worth reminding people at this juncture that we do these consultations is to take that feedback back in and to continue making amendments after this phase. So while the consultation itself closes on the 31st, which is next Monday, the process of designing the route doesn't finish at that point. Detailed design will continue in consultation with the affected people along the route as well. So I think that's an important point to remember. So the next question that's come in, we all know the R132 is a particularly long stretch of road running all the way from Swords right through to Balbriggan, and I suppose most of it know it still as the old Dublin to Belfast road. And somebody has asked, this is only one small segment of that. Why do Fingal put in bits and pieces at one time and not do the whole road in one go?
I suppose number one is it's time, resources and money, I suppose, is the three areas on that we look at. We have managed to secure funding from the NTA. There is a commitment there for that route right through from the Dublin Cycling Network map that we've actually just looked at here in the presentation. So what we're looking to do is do it in phases. So it's very difficult to set it out in a large phase. Some of the areas need different considerations as regards the width of the road. Do we need additional space? As you get further north, I suppose past Murthas at the lock and so on, the road narrows in quite considerably. So maybe it's a different design is required in those phases or whatever. So there's a number of considerations of why we split it up into areas. If you were to break all the eggs into the pan the one time, I suppose we mightn't have a great omelette, but if you cook them slowly, we might get some nice omelettes out of it. So I suppose that's really the reason we're trying to just break it into phases that's manageable and that we can turn it out and provide some reassurance as regards to people once they see it happening, that'll be more acceptable of the next phases, I'm sure.
Thanks, Breen. That's a kind of a helpful bigger picture. And actually, the next question really relates again to those wider linkages out from this project to other ones. So this person has asked, can you mention other related projects, including links from Lusk to the train station, as well as from Lusk to the Fingal Coastal Way and Rogerstown Park? How will those schemes work in tandem with this one?
I suppose that's what we're looking at really from an active travel point of view. There's a number of schemes happening, I suppose, on three fronts really. Number one, what we're looking at is our larger greenway schemes, and that's been handled through our planning and strategic, which is our Fingal Coastal Way and so on. What we're looking at, I suppose, is some of these schemes that's identified, which we would call secondary routes. We have our primary routes, our secondary routes, and so on. And together with that, we're looking at linkages basically through our towns and villages, through towns and villages schemes to provide connectivity out through that. So the likes of Lusk and Rush, Donabate, Portrane and so on, or Portan, would fall in under a town and village scheme, and we would look at them from not only cycling infrastructure, you'd look at it from a public realm point of view and what else can be delivered alongside these projects. So there is a number of other schemes that has been identified in our 3 and 5 year plans with the NTA where commitments have been given. But again, it's a programme of works. This is the current programme on this year's programme of works. There will be further add-ons to next year, which includes, we have linkages there from Donabate to Portrane. We have other issues there in Lusk, where we'll be later on this year doing our safer routes to school around the Lusk and Rush Educate Together school. So all those pieces of the jigsaw will finally fit together in a larger programme, but it's impossible to do the jigsaw with one piece, I suppose, and that's what we need to look at. So it's management of resources, of funding, and a number of other considerations that we have to consider.
Thanks for that bigger picture. It sounds like you have an awful lot of work planned for the next few years. So we mentioned briefly accommodation of pedestrians along the route. Somebody's asking for a little bit more detail. How will pedestrians be accommodated along this piece of the scheme?
I suppose in most cases what it is, it's a shared surface. It's actually for cyclists and for walkers as well. So there will be a number of signages as well, signage along the route, basically to beware of pedestrians and cyclists to beware of cyclists and so on and so forth. So it is a shared surface. It's an excessive, maybe 2.5 meters wide in most cases. But what we can do is some divide can be given. But again, it's from this process and basically getting a feeling from the public themselves of what the demands are there. Is basically that can be incorporated back into the design. If we need separated distance between the two or some delineation also, we would hope that that can be addressed as much as possible.
Thanks, Breen. Again, I'd like to just take an opportunity to remind people who are attending the call this morning that, or I should say this afternoon, pardon me, that your submissions really are incredibly valuable in this process. And that question there shows us that obviously there is concerns around pedestrian accommodation and there's nothing to beat local knowledge. So if you have particular concerns around that provision for pedestrians, please do put a submission in. Again, it's consult.fingal.ie. You'll see it up on the screen at the end of this again, just reminding you. And you can tell us just a few lines, letting us know what the issues are or make a suggestion around what you think the improvements should be, and that can help us to design the scheme in detail when we get to that next phase of the work. So the next comment has come in is specifically around Killhedge Lane, where someone is commenting that they feel it's not currently safe to cycle on due to the width of the lane, which is allowing cyclists and not allowing cyclists and cars, pardon me, to pass at the same time. And they've asked, is there an upgrade plan for the lane at Killhedge? Will it just be resurfaced, or will there be road widening or other provisions made there? Breen, can I ask you to come in there?
I suppose in the current design, really, there's quite an overgrowth on the hedge lines there within that, and that gives the perception that the road is actually narrower than it is. So I suppose the initial rollout and construction phase on that would be to trim back the hedge lines in relation to it, see what widths there are in gaining, and also basically where there's an option for pull-in areas to allow a second car to pass, or otherwise they will be exploited as well.
And Breen, a further comment has come in on that, actually, just to ask you to add to that. Will ditches be filled in to widen the lane along Killhedge?
Unfortunately, that would go against the realms of our development plan, where we try to maintain from a SUDS and biodiversity point of view, we try to maintain those open ditches as much as possible. But no is the answer to that. We won't be filling in any hedges.
Can I just clarify there, when you say SUDS, that's drainage, am I correct?
SUDS is drainage, yes, so sustainable urban drainage. But not only that, what you're expecting there is when you start to pipe a ditch, what you're creating there is a massive release basically of water at one time, and you're restricting the flow. there's nothing like the natural ditch to let water flow in flood times. So that's against some of the objectives within our development plan, which we have to observe as well.
Thanks, Breen, for that clarification. So again, we're going to return to the topic of Corduff School, and someone has asked, how can cars safely do a U-turn when collecting at Corduff School to collect their children and go back to the Lusk area?
Well, number one, I suppose cars shouldn't be doing a U-turn on a main road anyway, considering the fact that you have a roundabout less than half a mile away, and that is the safe way to do it. So I suppose I would have to, discourage anybody doing a U-turn on a main road. The fact that we're slowing traffic speeds down, that might encourage them maybe more to do it or not, but I would discourage basically anybody doing a U-turn on a main road in any direction. Specifically when you have a roundabout and a function to do it less than a mile up the road.
Thanks, Breen. A next question has come in from a concerned resident who is living in the area along the route and has said, will there be detailed consultation with residents regarding the design of bollards outside the residences along that route? This person says they currently need to pull onto the hard shoulder from their home in order to see cars coming and to know that it's safe to move out onto the main road. And they're concerned that this will create risk to cyclists and to walkers if that design hasn't been carefully considered. Would you like to comment there?
I suppose we have carefully considered it on a number of areas, but then again, once we get to site and to the construction phase, there will be ongoing consultation at each basically point through the project with the individual involved. And it's really at the construction phase of when we'll be able to iron out any difficulties there. At the moment, what we would have considered is the sight lines coming from that, and that's looking at it both on the ground from surveys that we would have completed and also through our design. But we again will be engaging with the people at construction phase to ensure that it's not causing any bollards, wouldn't be causing an obstruction or otherwise to any resident pulling out onto the main road.
Thanks, Breen. A further comment here around Killage Lane. I'm just going to offer this to you for comment yourself. This person says Killage Lane has already had hedge cutting done on it this year and that they still feel it's not wide enough for cyclists and cars to pass. Is there any further comment you'd like to add there?
I suppose there's not much further comment we can make. It is actually a quiet way, so or it is actually a small boreen or lane, country lane. I suppose by widening that, all you're doing is encouraging more traffic. I suppose the object of this scheme is not to encourage traffic on it, it's to encourage cycling and walking as a quiet way. So it's not really an encouragement to put traffic into it, it's to discourage traffic from doing it. They have the option of using Minister's Road or other alternatives rather than using this lane.
And Maureen, can I clarify, would the intention there with the lower speeds be that the cars and cyclists shouldn't actually be passing, but that the cars would be travelling at low enough speed to go in tandem with the bikes?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, the lower speeds actually would encourage it, and it also would give confidence to the vulnerable road users that they're not in fear of somebody coming flying around the corner to them.
Thanks for that. So the R132, particularly in that section, obviously has quite a bit of manufacturing around it in the local area in terms of employment, and manufacturing kind of in the local areas has a long history, as well as the agriculture in the local area. And someone is asking here, will the road width still accommodate agricultural and heavy goods vehicles which use that road a lot?
Absolutely, that's what we've just said from the slides and the design we've looked at. Really what you will have is the bollards and so on the inside, but we will be still maintaining the reservation to the centre to somewhat, so it will be a hatched area to allow them to override that area. We can understand if a fella's coming down there with a combine harvester, it's an awful lot wider than your normal Ford, Kia, or I don't want to name cars here, but your smaller cars anyway. So he needs that overhang basically to carry basically whatever he has, let it be a sprayer, combine harvester, or whatever it might be. So that will be facilitated and is facilitated within the design.
Thanks, Breen. We have had a number of consultations of this kind in the last year, and you and I have worked in a number of them together. Is there any particular type of consultation submission that comes in that you find most useful as a design team and an engineering team when it comes to putting these consultations together? The reason I'm asking this question is to try and give those around the call a little inspiration around the types of submissions they can or should make.
I think every submission is relevant, Roisin, because it's relevant to that person, and we take them seriously as an engineering team, because if it's a concern to them, well, then it needs to be considered within the design. It can be as little as, I suppose, one person has mentioned in relation to the bollards and the need to pull out further onto the hard shoulder to get visibility, I suppose, and so on. So any submission, let it be from a walking perspective, cycling perspective, even an aesthetic perspective, we welcome them because it learns us as well as regards, it learns the design team as regards what we need to be dealing with and what we can do basically to help people use the new infrastructure as we present it.
Thanks for that. Another question's come in here around public transport provision, and somebody's just asking, can bus stops have seats put in them along the route? Is this something that we have influence over?
Yes, it is and it isn't. We don't normally have influence over them, to be honest, because that comes from the TII themselves as regards what design they put in. There's two options in, and that I suppose relates to the amount of people that use their stops, and that comes from their data, where you have a lot of people using one particular bus stop at different times or whatever. They tend then to go with a sheltered bus stop with seating in it. Where they're a bit more sporadic and in a more rural area where they're not used that often, it tends to be just a pole. There is also the issue in relation to planning permissions. Once you put a structure on the side of the road in relation to a bus stop with a shelter, that has to go through a different process. So it does require planning permission where the poles can be erected really on agreement with the local authority.
And Breen, just to clarify, with the planning permission, that scenario potentially mean a delay in delivery of new bus stops along the route?
That would mean a delay in delivery, yes. Now, it's not that it can't be done, but it's something we can look at. If there's a specific area that you require, we can pass those requirements on to the TII, who is looking at the bus stop installations, and ask them to basically consider that observation.
Okay, thanks for that. So the questions coming in the Q&A box seem to have started to slow down, and I think we've come to the end of questions that have been sent in. So I'm just going to flag it now that there's another opportunity to continue adding everybody's questions in if you'd like to get something else in. While we wait for that final opportunity for people to tell us what they'd like to know, I just wanted to ask you, Breen, is there one particular piece of information you'd like people to take away from the session today?
I suppose the one piece of information we want to take away is what we're trying to do is create a hierarchy really of protecting the vulnerable road users along the route, and to make it more amenable really for the locals to get out and walk from an active travel point of view. So it's not walking or cycling, there's something that everybody can do at all age groups and all abilities. So that's the one main, I suppose, message we want to get through. Again, as you've outlined yourself and I've outlined earlier, if anybody has any issue or otherwise that they feel is relevant to them, don't be embarrassed about putting it in. Put in the submission, let us deal with it, or deal with it to our best ability within the process.
Thanks, Breen. Someone has taken the opportunity there to squeeze another question in, and again, it's around Killhedge Lane. It's, I suppose, more a comment, but I'll offer this to you for your own comment back. And I would say before I do so that obviously this individual, there's a lot of queries coming up around Killhedge Lane. Pardon me, my voice is going. And we would definitely say, having looked at the question list that's come in this afternoon, that there's submissions that should be issued in over the issues and problems around Killhedge Lane, so we'd encourage anyone who is concerned about it to write that submission at consult.fingal.ie as well. But just to offer that comment up now, this person says there are 3 blind bends on Killhedge Lane and cyclists are extremely vulnerable to cars on the lane under the current setup. Breen, would you like to respond to that?
I suppose the current setup, really the speed limit has to change on that, number one. So basically that's going to encourage basically slower traffic movement on it. In relation to where the 3 bends are, yes, we are looking at those with our designers as well to see what can be done to encourage a lower speed. Now, realistically, cars do actually slow down on those 3 bends. They are quite severe. And really, when you're walking on them, you can hear cars coming at you or otherwise. But what we're looking at there is additional signage, possibly speed ramps, or at least there's they're nearly like vibration bars. That's what we're looking at. But something as well as regard further road markings on that to slow traffic down, to make them aware that there is cyclists and pedestrians present.
Thanks for that. And moving from Killhedge Lane to Ministers Road, another query has come in saying, is there any plan for Ministers Road for cyclists and pedestrians?
Currently what there is, they're looking at basically Ministers Road from Dunema right through, but there is, I suppose, another section of that right back out to the R132. It's quite restricted there on that as regards the road width is very, very narrow, so it would require land take or another option, let it be developer driven or let it be discussions with the landowner themselves or whatever that might be. But the existing road widths there at the moment don't allow for additional road space for footpaths or cycling.
Thanks, Breen. I can appreciate there's some difficulty there with that. So with that, it would appear that we've come to the end of the list of questions. We're looking to finish up now a little earlier than we expected. If anybody has any questions that arise for them after this event and they didn't get a chance to raise them today or weren't quite sure what they wanted to raise today, again, please do raise a submission. So go to consult.fingal.ie where you can add your comments in. And again, as we said, you can add them in as an individual or perhaps as a representative of a commercial association or a residents group in the area or a sports club and so on. You're very welcome to do so. You have until Monday at 23:59, so a minute to midnight on Bank Holiday Monday evening to let us know what your queries and comments are in relation to the proposed designs for the scheme. I think we've kind of run out of time to get through any further questions today, but please do send them in. And if you would like to answer a query prior to putting in your submission, you can email active.travel@fingal.ie and we'll endeavour to get back to you as soon as possible with further information to help you out in that regard. A recording of this webinar has been made and it will be put on the website. So that's fingal.ie/active travel/R132/Lusk. And we'll be promoting that link and the availability of the video of the recording on social media across the coming days as soon as it's made available. And we'd encourage you to share that with other people who are maybe interested who perhaps couldn't make it to today's session. And we really appreciate those of you who could, and thank you very much for your very insightful and important questions. We hope we've done our best to answer them to the best of our ability today. And we look forward to working further on this consultation in the coming weeks. My thanks to Breen and to his team for preparing for this session and for giving us a presentation at the beginning. And my thanks also to Daniel Gleeson from the Communications Unit who produced this webinar. If you do intend to make a submission, please don't miss the deadline. So a minute to midnight on Monday, the 31st of October. Submissions can be made at consult.fingal.ie. Don't delay and get that submission in as soon as possible. Good afternoon and thank you very much for your time.